Usually when we talk about, a funeral in modern Western culture, there's this really heavy expectation of presentation.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a production.
Right. It feels almost like staging a play. Like the instinct is to just completely hide the reality of death at all costs.
Mhm.
You bring in the experts, you use heavy cosmetics, you pump the body with embalming fluids. You're basically trying incredibly hard to make the person look like they are just peacefully sleeping.
Yeah, and I mean, it creates this sort of protective illusion for everyone. We delay the services to make sure every out-of-town relative can, like, buy a plane ticket.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we put the immediate family in this really strange artificial holding pattern. The event kind of becomes about managing the comfort of the living, rather than acknowledging the actual harsh physical reality of what just happened.
But then you step into the world of the Islamic death care tradition, and suddenly that entire production it's completely stripped away.
Totally gone.
Yeah, so today we're taking a deep dive into a philosophical landscape that is honestly startlingly raw. We are pulling heavily from this really compelling document published by Vigils.app, which is this comprehensive Muslim funeral planning guide.
It's a great resource.
It really is. And for you listening, whether you're, prepping to support your own community or you're just a curious learner fascinated by how different cultures handle mortality, the mission today is to explore how a 1,400-year-old sacred tradition intersects with our modern, highly regulated American death care system. And the contrast is just profound.
The contrast fundamentally comes down to three priorities, really.
Mhm.
Simplicity, honesty, and incredible speed.
Speed is a huge one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
To grasp how different this is, you have to look at the exact moment a doctor pronounces the death.
Hmm.
Like in a hospital, that's usually when the professionals take over and the family steps back, right?
Right. The nurses usually ask you to leave the room.
Exactly. But in this tradition, the family is actually called to step forward immediately. The spiritual philosophy has to instantly become a physical reality. So there are these four core obligations the living owe to the deceased.
Right. And those are ghusl, which is washing, kafan, the shrouding, salat al-janaza, the prayer, and dafn, the burial.
Perfect, yes. And it starts with those immediate physical tasks, they're deeply intimate.
Yeah, I was reading about those first few minutes. First, someone gently closes the eyes of the deceased. Then they take a wide bandage or a piece of cloth and literally tie it under the chin and over the top of the head,
Right.
because it keeps the jaw closed, preventing the mouth from falling open as the muscles completely relax, which is intense but practical.
Very practical.
Yeah.
And they also straighten the arms and legs before rigor mortis even has a chance to set in, ensuring the limbs don't stiffen in some awkward position.
Wow, yeah. And finally, they cover the entire body with a clean sheet to protect its privacy, which is a concept known as the ara.
And while those intensely practical physical tasks are happening, the spiritual foundation is laid simultaneously.
Yeah, there's a specific phrase they say, right?
Yeah, the very first words spoken in the room are, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi rajiun.
And that translates to,
It means, indeed, to Allah we belong, and to Him we return.
wow.
It was essentially a declaration of patience. It frames the loss not as a theft, but as a return of something that was only ever on loan. And then, if the physical space allows for it, the body is turned to face the Qibla, the direction of Mecca.
And here is where the timeline completely upends our modern sensibilities. Like, the guide is explicit. The goal is to bury the body within 24 to 72 hours.
Which is incredibly fast by American standards.
Unbelievably fast. Embalming is strictly forbidden. Elective autopsies are avoided unless, state law absolutely requires it.
Yeah.
I was actually trying to think of an analogy for this, and it hits me that the modern American funeral industry is sort of like staging a house for a sale.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, like you paint over the cracks, you bring in rented furniture, you make everything look pristine, and you kind of just ignore the reality that the house is actually empty.
That captures the cosmetic nature of it perfectly.
But the Islamic approach is like closing up a beloved family home for a long winter. It is deeply practical, it's incredibly respectful, but you are acknowledging that the season has definitively changed.
Right. Wow.
You're boarding the windows, you're shutting off the water mains, you aren't pretending summer is still here.
And the psychological wisdom behind that philosophy of speed it's profound. Think about the last time you, as a listener, witnessed a delayed funeral.
It's agonizing.
It really is. Waiting a week or more so guests can arrive just prolongs the limbo of grief for the immediate family.
Yeah.
They're stuck in this torturous freeze frame. Speed forces the family to face the reality of the loss immediately. You just cannot deny it.
Yeah, you have to process it.
Exactly. And spiritually, it honors the deceased by hastening them to their rest, prioritizing the person who passed away over, like, the scheduling convenience of the guests.
Which is a total paradigm shift. And because that clock is ticking so fast, the preparation of the body has to happen almost immediately. That brings us to the intimate acts of purification and shrouding.
The ritual wash.
Right, which is called ghusl. It is done strictly by the same gender, with the exception of spouses, who are permitted to wash each other.
Yeah.
And the body is washed an odd number of times 3, 5, or 7. What's the significance of the odd numbers?
Well, the odd numbers are a recurring theme in Islamic tradition. It stems from the theological concept that God is one, an odd number, and loves the odd. It symbolizes spiritual completion.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. During this wash, they use warm water and a traditional cleansing agent called sidr.
That's from lote tree leaves, right?
Exactly. Though the guide notes that mild soap is perfectly acceptable in the U.S., and the final rinse incorporates camphor.
Right, which has a really distinct smell.
It does. Camphor provides a strong, clean fragrance, but historically, it also acted as a natural deterrent to insects before the burial.
Now, I have to admit, reading this part, I experienced a moment of intense pushback. I mean, I put myself in those shoes, and I thought, wouldn't it be just emotionally devastating to physically wash your own parent or your own spouse?
Oh, sure.
Because in the West, we happily pay professionals thousands of dollars to do this behind stainless steel doors, specifically so we don't have to face it.
It's entirely understandable why that sounds daunting to a modern ear. We're just so insulated from death.
Yeah, completely.
But the guide emphasizes that while local mosque committees are always there to help with the technical logistics, family involvement is considered a final, profound act of love.
A profound act of love. Wow.
Yeah, it replaces the cold, clinical feeling of a mortuary with a deeply sacred space. You are using your own hands to care for the person who cared for you in life.
It's a radical confrontation with reality, honestly. And I read about a fascinating variation in the Shia tradition concerning this intimacy. They have a concept called ghusl mas al-mayyit.
Right, that's secondary wash.
Yeah, essentially, if a living person touches the cold body of the deceased before that ritual wash is fully complete, that living person must take a ritual bath themselves to return to a state of purity.
It really recognizes the heavy, almost tangible transfer of state between the living and the dead.
It does. And once the body is purified, it's immediately wrapped in the kafan, the shroud, which I think is perhaps the most visually striking departure from the Western casket industry.
Oh, without a doubt, the kafan is just unstitched, inexpensive white cotton.
No velvet lining.
None at all. It consists of 3 specific pieces for men, the izar, kameez, and lafafa. For women, it is 5 pieces, adding the kimar and kurka to ensure complete modesty.
And the sociology embedded in that simple white cloth is brilliant. It is the ultimate equalizer.
The great leveler.
Yes, picture a tech billionaire and a daily wage laborer passing away on the exact same day. In this tradition, they are buried in the exact same cheap white cloth. As the old proverb goes, there are no pockets in a shroud.
Exactly. You take absolutely none of your worldly status with you. Extravagance isn't just frowned upon, it is actively prohibited.
Wow.
And that profound equality doesn't stop with the deceased. It bleeds into how the broader community is expected to act. Because once the body is washed and shrouded, the responsibility shifts dramatically outward.
Right, from the intimate family to everyone else in the surrounding area.
Yes.
And this shift is governed by a legal and spiritual concept called fard kifaya, which means a communal obligation. The mechanics of this just blew my mind.
It's a really powerful concept.
It really is. The rule dictates that if some members of the community step up and perform the funeral prayer, the entire community is absolved of the duty. But if no one does it, the entire community bears the sin of neglect.
It functions like an algorithm for community care.
It's a spiritual safety net. Imagine being the most isolated, lonely person in a massive city. This built-in mechanism ensures that no human being is ever forgotten in death.
Yeah, the community is legally and spiritually obligated to show up, forcing neighbors to acknowledge a loss, even if they, weren't close friends.
And when that community gathers, they perform Salat al-Janaza, the funeral prayer. For anyone familiar with standard daily Islamic prayers, the physical difference here is really striking.
It is.
Daily prayers usually involve bowing and prostrating, pressing the forehead to the ground, but the Janaza prayer is performed entirely standing up. Which raises the question, wait, why no bowing?
Right, so bowing and prostrating are physical acts of worship reserved exclusively for God. During a funeral, the community is standing directly in front of the deceased body.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so to avoid any implication whatsoever that they are worshiping the deceased, the physical submission is removed. They just stand, reciting 4 specific takbirs, or 5 in the Shia tradition, offering intense prayers of intercession.
They're asking for mercy.
Exactly, asking for mercy and forgiveness for the soul that has passed.
And immediately after that standing prayer, the crowd moves to the cemetery for the dafn, the burial. The body is laid directly in the grave on its right side, physically turned to face the Qibla. But, and this is where it gets complicated, this is where a 1,400-year-old desert tradition slams headfirst into modern American bureaucracy.
Oh, it's a massive logistical headache.
Right, because Islamic law requires the body to be buried in just the shroud, directly touching the earth.
Huh.
But almost all U.S. cemetery bylaws require rigid outer containers or thick concrete vaults.
Yeah, so the heavy machinery doesn't cause the ground to settle over time.
Right, so navigating that clash requires some serious ingenuity. It's like trying to run a new operating system on incompatible hardware.
That's a great way to put it.
The guide details the workarounds. Muslims adapt by using what they call shroud boards, which is just a piece of untreated wood the body rests on, or they use bottomless vaults.
Right, an inverted concrete box with no floor.
Exactly. That satisfies the cemetery's rule for structural integrity, holding up the earth above, but the body itself still physically touches the soil below.
Which is crucial.
And it's also why green burials are seeing a massive surge in popularity among American Muslims right now. A green cemetery's rules align perfectly with Islamic requirements. No embalming, no vaults, just natural decomposition.
And the physical participation of the community continues at the grave itself, too. Mourners don't just stand back and watch a mechanical pulley lower a casket.
Right. They get involved.
They actively approach the edge and throw 3 handfuls of dirt directly into the grave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the tactile reality of feeling the soil, of physically burying a member of your community is incredibly grounding. It reinforces the ancient truth, from dust you were created and to dust you return.
And the modesty extends to the grave marker as well, doesn't it? Like, there are no marble mausoleums or towering angel statues.
No, extravagant monuments are strictly prohibited. A simple stone with a name and dates is acceptable just to mark the location, but the focus remains entirely on the prayers being offered for the person, not the physical grandeur of the stone they leave behind.
It's all so intentional. And the moment the dirt is placed on that modest grave, the camera essentially pans away from the deceased and focuses entirely on the living.
Yes, the community's duty pivots instantly to the architecture of grief.
Right. Think about the last time you went to a funeral. What did you say to the grieving family? You probably hugged them and said, "Let me know if you need anything."
We all do it.
We all do it. It sounds compassionate, but it inadvertently puts the entire burden of asking for help on a person who is already crushed by shock and exhaustion.
It really does.
But this tradition completely rewrites that social etiquette.
It introduces the taziyah, the designated 3 days of mourning. During this window, the community is explicitly required to bring easy-to-reheat food to the family.
The casserole rule.
The casserole rule. The grieving household is strictly relieved of all hosting duties.
It dictates that you don't ask what they need. You just show up with food, offer a quick prayer of comfort, and then you leave them in peace.
Right. You do not linger in their house expecting tea or conversation.
It gives the initial shock of grief a highly defined, deeply supported container.
And for widows, that container is extended through a specific period called the Ida, which lasts 4 lunar months and 10 days.
4 months and 10 days.
Yes. Historically, this time frame served a biological purpose to determine if the widow was pregnant before settling inheritance. But psychologically, it acts as a dedicated cocoon.
Makes sense.
It's a buffer against making drastic life decisions immediately after a trauma.
And the guide is quick to point out the practicality of the Ida in a modern context. Like, if a widow needs to go to work, pay bills, or buy groceries, she is completely permitted to do so. The restriction is really about avoiding celebratory social gatherings or pursuing new marriages, not about being locked in a house.
Exactly. And within this framework, there is a very clear theological distinction between permitted and forbidden grief.
Oh, this was fascinating.
Yeah, crying, sobbing, expressing deep, overwhelming sadness that is completely natural and encouraged. History records that even the Prophet Muhammad wept openly when his own son died.
So suppressing human emotion is not the goal.
Not at all. But there is a line drawn at a concept called nayaha.
Right. And nayaha translates to wailing, shrieking, beating the chest, or tearing one's clothes.
Correct. And the reasoning behind forbidding this is really interesting. In Islamic theology, theatrical wailing acts as a physical protest against a divine timeline.
Right. It implies that a mistake was made.
Exactly. It implies an injustice occurred by God taking the soul. It contradicts the core foundational belief that every single soul's time of death is perfectly ordained.
And to ensure the family isn't simply abandoned after the casserole stopped coming on day 3, the tradition builds in milestones.
Yeah, long-term support.
Like, the Shia tradition observes Arbain, the 40th day after the passing, which brings the community back together to remember the deceased. And then there is a concept that completely reframes legacy, which is Sedekah Jariyah.
The translation of that is ongoing charity.
It is brilliant. You plant a tree, you build a water well in a village, you fund a medical scholarship in the deceased person's name.
Right.
The belief is that every single time a traveler drinks from that well or someone sits in the shade of that tree, the deceased person continues to gather good deeds in the afterlife.
Their spiritual ledger remains open.
Yeah. Gathering positive momentum long after they are physically gone. But to ensure all of these ancient, intricate traditions, the immediate washing, the shroud, the specific burial rules, the ongoing charity, can actually happen seamlessly within a complex legal system like the U.S., it requires a legally binding master plan.
Enter the wasiya, the Islamic will.
The will, because if the U.S. cemetery vault rules are a hardware issue, the inheritance laws are a major software conflict.
A huge conflict.
If you die without a will in the United States, state intestacy laws decide exactly who gets your assets based on a rigid secular formula. But Islamic law dictates a completely different distribution, right?
Yes, where 2/3 of the estate must go to fixed, Quranic shares among specific family members.
And the individual only has discretionary control over the remaining 1/3.
Exactly. That third can be directed to charities for that ongoing Sadaqah Jariyah, or bequeathed to non-Muslim relatives who wouldn't automatically inherit under the fixed shares.
Right.
So to reconcile this, American Muslims have to utilize a Sharia clause within a legally binding U.S. document. It bridges the gap between religious obligation and secular law.
And the pre-planning extends to consumer rights as well. The guide points out the importance of knowing regulations like the FTC funeral rule.
This is so important.
It really is. Funeral homes legally cannot charge you a quote-unquote handling fee just because you choose to provide your own simple $20 cotton shroud instead of buying their $3,000 mahogany casket. You have to know your rights to maintain the simplicity of the tradition.
And that planning is especially vital when dealing with special modern circumstances, like the tension around the body itself.
Yeah, this is a tension that completely stopped me in my tracks while reading the guide. We established earlier that Islam strictly forbids elective autopsies, embalming, and cremation.
Right.
The theological basis is that the human body is a sacred trust from God. It shouldn't be altered, and burning it is considered a severe desecration. You can't even embalm a body to fly it back to a home country, which makes international repatriation incredibly difficult.
Yeah, forcing the tradition to emphasize being buried wherever you pass away. The physical integrity of the deceased is paramount.
Right, you cannot alter the body. Yet, despite that strict prohibition, organ donation is explicitly allowed. How does that work? Like, why is taking a scalpel to the body forbidden for an autopsy or embalming, but celebrated for organ donation?
It is a stunning intersection of ethics and theology. The tension is resolved by relying on a higher Quranic principle. Saving one life is as if saving all of humanity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the preservation of living human life sits at the very top of the ethical hierarchy. It actively overrides the rule against altering the deceased body.
So it's an exception to the rule.
Exactly. Organ donation isn't viewed as a desecration. It is viewed as the ultimate, most profound form of Sadaqah Jariyah. You are literally giving parts of your physical self as an ongoing charity to keep another human being alive.
That is incredible. And honestly, coordinating all of this under intense emotional duress, executing the will, finding a green cemetery, organizing the ritual wash, deploying the community food network, it is a monumental task.
It's overwhelming for anyone.
Which is exactly why platforms like Vigils.app, the publisher of this guide, exist. They provide the logistical scaffolding for diaspora families who might be spread across multiple states, helping them coordinate these hyper-specific requirements in real time.
It decentralizes the logistics so the burden doesn't just crush the immediate family.
Yeah, absolutely. So, bringing this entire journey together, what becomes clear is that even if you aren't planning a Muslim funeral, understanding this tradition offers a profoundly grounding perspective on our own mortality.
It really does.
It aggressively strips away the commercialism of death. It forces us to focus on community action over passive observation. It demands radical equality, placing everyone in the same cheap white cotton, and asks us to return naturally to the earth we came from.
It completely reframes death from being an isolated individual end into a deeply communal transition.
But before we wrap up, I want you to imagine one final scenario from the text. What happens in a tragedy where there is simply no body? Think of a plane crash lost over the ocean, or a devastating fire where the physical remains are entirely lost to the elements.
That's a heavy thought.
It is, and the entire tradition is built around washing, shrouding, and burying the physical form. So what do?
It is the ultimate test of the community's obligation.
And the tradition answers it with Salat al-Ghaib, the funeral prayer in absentia. Even without a body, the community still gathers. They still stand shoulder to shoulder facing Mecca. They still recite the exact same prayers of intercession for the soul.
They ensure the grieving family still receives that essential container of closure.
And the casseroles.
Yes, and the casseroles.
It proves that while the tradition treats the physical body with profound, urgent respect, the human connection completely transcends physical remains. It doesn't matter that the physical quote-unquote house is gone. The community still shows up to honor the season.
That is a phenomenal testament to the resilience of the tradition.
It really leaves you thinking about how we show up for each other. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.